Anastasia again. So just to remind you what happened, Anastasia and her father and her baby brother and her mother, they have to move to a new house because the house is getting too small for them, and they're moving to the suburbs, and Anastasia is really unhappy about it. We learned that Anastasia wrote letters to her father's fans. Her father is an author and a poet, and that really upset Anastasia's father, and she talked about a boy that she really didn't like, and yeah, that she's very unhappy about the whole situation. Chapter 3. Telephone for you, Anastasia, her mother called from the kitchen. Anastasia put down her book and walked toward the kitchen, thumping her hand along the wall. Thumping means hitting. Who is it? She asked her mother. I don't know. I didn't ask. Boy or girl? What a dumb question. Boys never called her. Girl? Of course. She took the phone, the receiver, and stretched the cord so that she could take the phone into the pantry where they do the laundry. Hello? Hi, Anastasia, this is Robert. Who? Robert Giannani. Remember the boy that she didn't like? Oh, I thought it was a girl. Good grief, what an incredibly dumb thing to say. It wasn't Robert Giannani's fault that his voice still sounded like a girl's. Anastasia sat down on the pantry floor and wanted to die on the spot. No, it's Robert. Maybe he hadn't noticed the incredibly dumb thing she had said. Hi, Robert. Hi. If only she had paid more attention to the Cosmopolitan article on being a sprightly conversationalist. It had had a section about phone flirtation. Not that she cared. I think secretly she likes Robert. Robert wasn't very sprightly at conversation either, for Pete's sake. Now they had said hi to each other twice, and no one was saying anything. I was just wondering the other day, Anastasia said finally, what do you do with your briefcase in the summertime? Oh, good grief, what an idiotic thing to say, as if she had been thinking about him or something. I keep stuff in it. I collect stuff. Oh, you want to go collect stuff with me? What do you mean? Well, do you want to go ride bikes, maybe go down by the river, and see if there's any interesting junk lying around? Oh, well, okay. Today, do you want to do it? Yeah, okay. I'll meet you down at your corner in about an hour, okay? I could come sooner, but I have to take a shower first. Okay. Goodbye. Anastasia groaned as she hung up the phone. Ugh! If only he hadn't said that about the shower. The absolutely last thing in this entire world that Anastasia wanted to know was that Robert Giannani was taking a shower, for Pete's sake. It was the most embarrassing thing she had ever heard. She wandered back into her bedroom, looked around at the clothes strewn on the floor, and had a horrible thought. She had nothing to wear. The jeans she was wearing had paint on one knee. Everything was on the floor, or the bed, or the chair, or in the closet for that matter, was either too small, or incredibly ugly, or else Robert Giannani had already seen her wearing it. Maybe she should call him back and tell him she couldn't go. But then he would ask why, and she would have to say she had no clothes, and that would be too embarrassing. She wandered back into the kitchen. Her mother was defrosting the refrigerator. Sam was sitting on the floor wearing only a diaper and sucking on chunks of ice that had come off and loose from the freezer. I'm eating ice, said Sam matter-of-factly. Sam had a knack. He had this thing where for saying things that were already completely obvious, like, I wet my diapers, or I'm eating my dinner, or I'm wearing my pajamas with clowns on them. I can see that you're eating ice, Sam, Anastasia said sarcastically, jokingly. Mum, you haven't by chance bought me any new clothes recently and forgotten to tell me, have you? Her mother brushed back her hair from her eyes with one hand. Nope, why would I do that? Oh, I don't know, I just hoped that you had. I don't have anything to wear. Are you going someplace? Yeah, I'm just going out to ride bikes with a friend of mine. No big deal. What's wrong with what you're wearing? Yuck. Look, paint on my knee. And this shirt has a torn sleeve. Well, it's pretty hot out. Why don't you wear your jogging shorts? Mom, you can see my legs in them. Her mother looked puzzled. Of course you can see your legs in them. You can see anybody's legs in jogging shorts, like running shorts. Well, my legs are too skinny if you must know. Her mother sighed. There's a clean pair of jeans in your drawer. If those won't do, I don't have any other suggestions. Unless you want to wear a dress. Anastasia thumped back down the hall into her room and unfolded the clean jeans from her drawer. She put them on. They weren't too bad. She pulled a shirt out of the drawer, started to put it on, suddenly realized what it said, and wadded it back into the drawer. Boston is for lovers, was what the shirt said. Ugh, good grief. What if she had already worn a shirt that said, Boston is for lovers, across the front when she went to meet Robert Giannani, the jerk? It made her face feel hot thinking about it. Now she was quite sure that a pimple was starting on her chin. Her chin felt huge. She looked in the mirror. Nothing on her chin except a couple of ugly freckles. Well, she was sure it was there, lurking and waiting under the freckles. Probably it would appear just as she met Robert. She would be standing there and all of a sudden, right when he was looking at her, this thing would come bursting out of her chin. Probably he would say something about it, that jerk. Anastasia found a shirt that she didn't hate too much, one with a hideous frog on the front, and she pulled it over her head. Now her hair was a mess. No time to wash her hair. She had washed it last night, but already it felt as if she had washed it with Crisco oil. Anastasia groaned, called, "See you!" to her mother and to Sam, and went off to get her bike out of the garage. Hi. Hi. Terrific. It was going to be just like the telephone conversation. Have you been having a good summer, Anastasia? Robert sounded just like her great auntie who called sometimes from Milwaukee, in America. Okay, I guess. I think we're going to move. You're going to move? Where are you going to move to? Someplace out in the suburbs, I guess. We're looking for a house. Robert wrinkled his nose. Anastasia wasn't sure if he was making a face about moving to the suburbs or if he had to wrinkle his nose to adjust his glasses. Sometimes she did that to adjust her glasses, especially if it was hot. That's lousy, Robert said sympathetically, feeling sorry for her. You'll have to go to a new school and everything, and you won't know anybody, and you won't have any friends. Boy, some people really know what to say to make you feel better and cheer you up. I don't think I want to talk about it, said Anastasia glumly, sadly. Well, come on then, said Robert. Let's ride down to the river. They got on their bikes, and Robert had his briefcase hooked onto the back of his. Typical, thought Anastasia, looking at the briefcase. Typical. The Charles River separated Cambridge from Boston. From their side, they could look across and see the skyscrapers of the city, the really big buildings. Anastasia loved Boston, but she loved her side of the river more, where the old brick buildings of Harvard stood. It's a university, one of the best universities in the world. Her father taught at Harvard. He rode a bike to work each day, and he carried a briefcase with him on his bike. But that was okay because he was 47 years old. Her mother's bike had a little seat for Sam, and that was okay too. In fact, her parents were perfect Cambridge people, Anastasia thought. Lots of Cambridge men had beards, as her father did, and rode bikes to work. Lots of Cambridge mothers wore jeans and rode bikes with baby seats to the grocery store, as her mother did. Nobody stared in Cambridge at her mother's clothes, like the French t-shirt with the picture of the chicken, and under the chicken an oval of the word oeuf in it. Oeuf meant egg in French. Anastasia's mother spoke French. She had spent a year in Paris painting before she was married. Not one single person in the suburbs would know what oeuf meant. I'm probably saying that wrong. Anastasia was absolutely certain of that. The banks of the Charles, so the area next to the river, were filled with people. There were always lots of people there on warm days. All sorts of people. College students lying on blankets reading. Families with babies and small children. Black people, white people, Chinese people, people who spoke other languages. Anastasia liked looking at the Indians the best. The women wore long, flowing dresses that were not really dresses at all, but pieces of bright cloth wrapped around them in a complicated way. Some of them had a single red spot decorating the center of their forehead. Their husbands wore turbans and had bushy beards and moustaches that came to points at the sides. Two of the turbaned men were throwing a frisbee back and forth, and between them a dark-skinned baby toddler wearing pampers. Anastasia wondered if there were drugstores in India with shelves of Pampers and Vitalis and Crest toothpaste, the same that they use in America. She and Robert had leaned their bikes against a tree. Near them, two girls speaking French were trying to put a kite together. They were doing it wrong, and Anastasia could have told them how to do it right, but the only French she knew was ouf and merci. Robert had unhooked his briefcase and saw him pick something up from under a bush and stash it away quickly in the briefcase. "What was that?" she asked. "Nothing, just junk." Liar. She had seen that it was a Playboy magazine. Maybe a magazine with pictures of naked women or something. "What kind of stuff do you usually find?" "Last week I found a piece of rope and a plastic wine glass. Once I found a dollar bill." A dollar bill. That wouldn't be so bad. She walked along beside Robert. There were a lot of things on the grass, but none of them were very interesting. Squashed beer cans, paper napkins, flattened cigarette packets. A little plastic car with wheels missing. She picked that up. Sam would like it. She put it in her pocket. "Robert, you want a sock?" Robert looked startled, as if she were going to hit him. To sock someone means to punch someone in Boston. "What for?" "No, I don't mean I'm going to punch or sock you. Do you want a sock, the kind you wear? There's one line over there." "What color?" He didn't see it. "Grey, but that's from the dirt. I think it's probably white." "I guess not. One sock's not very useful." "You could hang it up at Christmas." Good grief, she wished she hadn't said that. She didn't want Robert to know that she still hung up a stocking at Christmas like a baby. But Robert grinned. "I use my mom's pantyhose at Christmas. She wears the stretchable kind." Anastasia giggled. She happened to know that Robert's mother was quite fat. She wondered if Mrs. Giannani wore the kind of pantyhose that Anastasia had seen at the supermarket, the ones called fat fanny pantyhose, like fat butt. Of course she couldn't ask Robert that. It was weird, the difference between talking to boys and talking to girls. Anastasia couldn't figure that out. She could have mentioned fat fanny pantyhose to her best friend, Jenny Macaulay, but in a million years she wouldn't have mentioned fat fanny pantyhose to Robert. But her mother didn't seem to have that problem, talking to her father, or talking to any of their men friends, in fact. Her mother could have said fat fanny pantyhose as if it were just an ordinary funny thing to say. What made it different talking to Robert? Anna decided to read the Cosmopolitan magazine article when she got home, the one about making sprightly conversation, to see whether it explained why there are certain people that you have trouble saying stuff to, and why it feels, when you are with those people, as if your tongue is too big. So I think Anastasia really likes Robert, but she's kind of pretending or telling herself that she doesn't. "You want to sit down and watch the boats?" asked Robert. They had walked quite a distance along the river. Robert had collected a few things: the Playboy magazine that he thought she hadn't seen, a paperback book copy of Shakespeare's sonnets, which he said he would give to his grandmother, a broken belt buckle, which he thought he could fix, a whole batch of popsicle sticks, which he said he could use for building things like model airplanes. Anastasia only had a little plastic car in her pocket and a matchbook from Hyatt Regency. They sat down, and Robert began to fool with one of his sneakers. Anastasia began to pray. She did not pray very often, only when absolutely necessary, but it was absolutely necessary right now. She prayed that Robert was not going to take his sneakers off. Anastasia thought that feet were the grossest and most disgusting things in the world. If she had to look at Robert Giannani's feet, she would die, right there on the banks of the Charles River. But he was only dislodging and taking out a small stone, a pebble. "Thank you, God," said Anastasia said to herself. "How is your family?" asked Robert politely. "They're okay. My father's teaching a couple of summer school courses, and my mother's finished just doing some illustrations for a book about seashells. Don't you have a baby brother? I remember when we were in 4th grade, your mom had a baby." Yeah, Sam, he's. Anastasia waited and hesitated. It was hard to describe Sam. He's kind of weird, she said finally. Robert looked puzzled. He can talk okay, Anastasia said. Why is he weird then? Good grief. It would be easy to explain. If she could tell about how Sam wasn't toilet trained, couldn't go to the bathroom by himself. But she couldn't say that to Robert any more than she could say fat fanny pantyhose. Then she remembered what her father had said about Sam. Some parts of him didn't develop as quickly as others, she told Robert. His brain is in good shape, but some other parts of him aren't so good. Oh, said Robert, I understand. They sat silently and watched the boats. The river was dotted with small sailboats, heeled over in the breeze. Anastasia thought it would be fun to be in a sailboat. She didn't know how to sail, but she thought it would be fun just to be a passenger, just to be sitting in the boat, maybe trailing her fingers in the water while Robert did the sailing. Good grief. Anastasia almost blushed. She had actually been thinking about sailing with dumb Robert Giannani, the jerk. Probably he would bring his briefcase along on a sailboat for Pete's sake. You know, said Robert, I've never told anybody this. Oh no, thought Anastasia. I don't want him to tell me something about he's never told anybody, for Pete's sake. But I have a cousin, so... Well, my cousin Pete, he's 16 years old. He's my Aunt Mary's son. Yeah? And he's retarded. So he's special. It's not a good word, don't use that word. That's too bad, said Anastasia politely. Robert was poking the grass with a twig. I mean, he's really severely retarded. He can't even live at home. He lives in a special place. Sometimes Aunt Mary's takes him out for the day. Sometimes she brings him to our house. And he's just like practically a baby or something. He can't even feed himself. That's too bad, said Anastasia politely again. She felt really sad, genuinely sad about Robert's cousin, Pete. So, well, the reason I told you that is because you shouldn't feel too bad about Sam. Because you said his brain is okay, that's really the important thing. It doesn't matter that he's deformed, that his body isn't the same. You shouldn't feel embarrassed about that or anything. Deformed? Good grief. Had she said that Sam was deformed? Why had she said that? And now that she had said it, and Robert made that long speech about his cousin, and he had never told anybody else for Pete's sake, now she certainly couldn't say, hey, I made a mistake, I lied, Sam isn't deformed. Yeah, well, I'm not really embarrassed about it, she said miserably. It's not that bad. And you know they can do a lot of good stuff at Children's Hospital. Probably your parents have already taken them there. Yeah, they have. That at least wasn't a lie. Sam had had x-rays at the Children's Hospital last year, when he tipped and fell over on his high chair and fell on his head. The x-rays were negative. He was fine. It took a long time to wash the oatmeal out of his hair, though. Robert said goodbye to Anastasia at the corner near her house. He said he was going to go home and make something out of his popsicle sticks. He also said two other things that made her feel strange. One was, if you move someplace not too far away, I'll ride out on my bike to see you. She answered, okay. And the other was, my family always donates money to the March of Dimes and stuff. She couldn't figure out why he said that. That's nice, she said, puzzled. Mine gives money to the Civil Liberties Union. The March of Dimes goes to help crippled children, like Sam, Robert explained before he rode away. Anastasia walked her bike down the block to where she lived. She decided that she would definitely read that article in Cosmopolitan. Maybe it would explain how some people got themselves into such dumb situations by simply opening their mouths. Maybe it would explain how to get out of those situations. She wondered how she would go about hiding Sam if Robert did come to visit her in the suburbs. It was all too complicated, too mysterious. She couldn't begin to make a title out of all the things that were mystifying in her life. Maybe she would write a letter. Dear Abby, instead. Dear Abby, Anastasia wrote, there is this boy in my class. I'll call him Richard to protect his identity. And the first thing that went wrong today was that Richard called me, and I said incredibly dumb things on the phone. And then She stopped. Dear Abby would laugh. Anastasia had a sudden, horrible vision of dear Annie, looking glamorous, sitting behind a mahogany desk, reading Anastasia's letter and wiping tears off her cheeks with a lace handkerchief because she was laughing so hard that she cried. Then she would publish the letter in the newspaper, and everyone in Anastasia's school, everyone in Cambridge in fact, would read it and would recognize who it was, because of course she would have to write about the briefcase. Everyone in Cambridge would laugh at her. She turned to a new page in her notebook. The mystery, she wrote, thinking in titles again, of why other people always think your very serious problems are very funny. So that's the end of this chapter. So basically, Robert asked her out on a date. She said yes. She got embarrassed because she thought she said something silly. They went to the river to collect things, and they're sitting and they're talking. Robert Giannani, the boy, tells her that her brother, or his brother, is retarded, which means he's special. He can't take care of himself. And then Anastasia kind of says something similar, but she didn't really mean to say it. So she's really regretting everything she said. She obviously likes this boy. It's the end.